The year is 1700. Lisbon, capital of the Portuguese Empire, glows like a city poised between worlds. From its hilltop palaces, one can look west to the Atlantic and east to the riches of Brazil, Africa, and India. Every wave that reached its harbor carried gold, spices, or secrets. Yet beneath the brilliance lurked danger. Wooden houses climbed steep hillsides, their tiled roofs glittering, but the earth beneath them quietly trembled. The century would test Lisbon in ways no city had ever endured. Today, thanks to advanced AI reconstruction, we can walk through 18th century Lisbon exactly as it stood before catastrophe and watch history rebuild itself from the ashes. Our journey begins on the banks of the Tagus, the vast river that made Lisbon a global capital. In the early 1700s, its waterfront teemed with life. Sailors shouting in Portuguese, Africans unloading cargo, merchants arguing prices under the cries of seagulls. Here stood the royal Ribeira Palace, seat of kings and navigators, its arcades opening directly onto the water. Diplomats arrived by barge, stepping into marble courtyards smelling of salt and power. From these docks, Portugal's fleets sailed toward Brazil and India, bringing home sugar, gold, porcelain, and enslaved labor. By mid-century, an estimated 600 ships every year sailed from here to the colonies. Their holds were filled with trade and contradiction. Jesuit missionaries beside casks of rum, slaves beneath crates of saints. The empire's wealth glittered brighter than its conscience. At sunset, the river turned to liquid fire, its surface covered with shimmering reflections. Locals called the Tagus the sea that obeys Lisbon, though in truth, it never obeyed anybody. It simply waited to remind the city who was stronger. Lisbon rose across 7 hills like a half-finished amphitheater facing the Atlantic. Narrow lanes climbed in switchbacks, paved with polished limestone that glowed silver at dawn. Houses leaned toward each other as if whispering gossip. Every wall was dressed in azulejos, glazed tiles of blue and gold telling stories of saints, sailors, and storms. From the castle of São Jorge, cannons pointed toward the horizon more for ceremony than defense. Down below stretched a living mosaic of noise and color, vendors crying, "Laranjas!" Oranges fresh from the Algarve, while donkeys grumbled up cobblestones under impossible loads. On summer nights, musicians played the raw folk songs that would later grow into fado, the lament of the city. Equal parts longing, laughter, and resignation. Lisbon didn't shout its emotions, it sang them into the salt air. No capital in Europe built churches more lavishly per capita than Lisbon. By the 1720s, the skyline glittered with cupolas and bell towers rising like marble prayers. Inside the church of São Roque, or the convent of Mafra, ceilings sparkled with gold leaf. The humble paint of Europe turned into the armor of faith. Portugal's empire provided both material and motive. Guilt required penance, and wealth demanded somewhere extravagant to kneel. Sculptors carved saints with human fatigue in their eyes. Painters filled side chapels with biblical soap operas starring familiar Lisbon faces. In a single Sunday, the city burned more candles than many villages saw stars. Outside, beggars rested against church walls, half hoping charity would spill as easily as incense. For Lisbon, religion was not withdrawal from the world. It was the performance of gratitude for still existing inside it. Lisbon's nobility lived in a gilded contradiction. The royal palace at Ribeira housed King João V, whose rule was financed by Brazilian gold smuggled home in fleets of galleons, painted wholly white to discourage pirates and guilt alike. João V styled himself a Portuguese Solomon, wise, wealthy, and occasionally surrounded by questionable advice. He built libraries larger than universities and funded the Mafra Palace, so vast that 4,000 workers and 45 mixture-confused architects argued over its design. In the Chiado district, nobles displayed imported silks, while their servants carried umbrellas woven in Goa. Carriages gleamed among beggars. The contrast smelled faintly of perfume and hypocrisy. Evenings belonged to opera. The king founded the Opera do Tejo, so extravagant that foreign visitors claimed it could rival any stage in Europe. Ironically, it opened in March 1755, and 6 months later disappeared in flames during the quake. To understand Lisbon is to understand its skin. Azulejos, the hand-painted tiles adorning every wall, were both decoration and diary. Patterns told genealogies, miracles, myths, and small jokes locals never bothered to translate. In workshops along Rua do Alecrim, artisans blended sand, oxide, and patience. Kilns blazed day and night. Apprentices wiped sweat in the same motion they painted halos. Every season had its fashion. One year peacocks, next year cherubs. Even stairwells became art galleries. Public fountains glimmered blue and white, telling tales of voyages and virtues. Foreigners called Lisbon a city made of porcelain. For the Venetians, that sounded poetic. For Lisbon's renters, it meant any earthquake was a rehearsal for heartbreak. Life in 1700s Lisbon was an orchestra of the senses. Fish, wine, arguments, all tuned to the same key. Markets sprawled through neighborhoods, Mercado da Ribeira for fish, Rocio for spices, and small street stalls for rumors. Women in long skirts balanced trays of figs on their heads, shouting slogans as rhythmic as drumming. Bakers spread sweet custard on warm pastries, the ancestors of today's pastel de nata. Slaves and free workers rented stalls side by side. Lisbon's diversity was visible long before anyone used the word. The language of trade was a universal Portuguese of necessity, part African, part Atlantic. At dusk, lamplighters climbed wooden ladders to light whale oil lamps, the glow trembling over cobblestones polished smooth by centuries of feet. The city didn't sleep so much as sigh in rhythm with the tide. The Alfama, oldest quarter of the city, clung to the hills like coral. Its labyrinth of alleys carried the scent of fish and orange blossom. Life here was poor but vivid. Children played tag around stone fountains. Old sailors told stories loud enough to reach tomorrow. At its center stood the Sé Cathedral, as ancient as Lisbon's fears. Built in the 12th century, rebuilt after every disaster, it symbolized a faith stubborn as the stones themselves. By the 18th century, the church walls had soaked up so much smoke they looked permanently candlelit. From the Miradouros, terraces overlooking the river, Lisboans watched sunsets so theatrical they might have charged admission. Beneath them sang the murmur of 1,000 kitchens preparing sardines, garlic, and gossip. Alfama was the city's heartbeat, ticking through centuries no quake could silence. Then came the unimaginable. On the morning of November 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day, Lisbon gathered in its churches for Mass. At 9:40 a.m., the ground convulsed. Stones buckled like waves, towers collapsed, and chandeliers swung one last time before plunging into the crowd. The air filled with dust and screams. Even the river seemed to tremble. Within 6 minutes, most of the city had vanished. Panic drove survivors toward the harbor, where the Tagus had mysteriously withdrawn. Minutes later, the returning wall of water carried an entire fleet into the streets. Fires followed, devouring what water had spared. For a week, Lisbon burned, a tragic baptism by every element. The city's great opera house perished the same year it was born. Scholars later called it Europe's first modern disaster. For Lisbon, it was simply Judgment Day before lunch. From ashes rose purpose. Prime Minister Sebastião de Mello, Marquis of Pombal, took command with ice in his veins. "Bury the dead and feed the living," he ordered, before planners even found the courage to plan. What followed was visionary. Orthogonal streets replacing the medieval maze, open plazas for air and dignity. The new downtown Baixa Pombalina was designed on graph paper and resilience. Buildings were uniform, solid, and beautiful. Their wooden frameworks formed invisible cages that swayed safely in earthquakes. Engineers tested prototypes by marching soldiers around them to simulate tremors, a rehearsal for the science of safety. Pombal's reforms reached beyond architecture. He limited the power of the clergy, promoted secular schools, expelled the Jesuits, and even reformed tavern licensing, proving there is no true enlightenment until public drinking is organized. By the 1770s, Lisbon was a modern capital. Coffee houses for thinkers, broad boulevards for gossip, and fountains that promised hygiene like salvation. Lisbon's rebirth ignited curiosity. Scholars founded the Academia das Ciências, translating Newton into Portuguese while arguing whether gravity also applied to politics. Instrument makers crafted telescopes to prove the stars no longer belonged solely to the church. Printing presses spawned encyclopedias and almanacs. Even sailors discussed astronomy between storms. The city hosted private salons where merchants quoted Rousseau with varying pronunciation but equal enthusiasm. Across the river in Belém, explorers' monuments reminded everyone that discovery had built this world. Now ideas would build the next one. At night, violinists filled the reconstructed theaters, blending Italian taste with Iberian heart. The new Lisbon was more than rebuilt stone. It was a rebuilt mind. The Lisbon of the 1700s was a drama in 3 acts: splendor, disaster, and reinvention. Few cities have ever died so completely and returned so elegantly. Its tiled walls glimmered once more, mirroring sunlight and memory. The straightened boulevards of the Baixa stood as equations of hope. Out of tragedy emerged a city that taught Europe resilience wrapped in beauty. To stroll those streets today is to hear, beneath the modern noise, the rhythm of an old fado line. Life insists. Lisbon proved that from ruin can rise design, from loss can rise light. Which city should we bring back next? Tell us in the comments, and your hometown might be our next voyage through time. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the past.